Watching subtitled anime with friends can be a frustrating experience for me as someone who's learned enough Japanese, or at least picked up on enough cliches in how anime is written, to constantly have problems with the way that things are translated. And since I'm a weird asshole, I always feel the need to explain these discrepancies out loud. Translation is a lot more art than science, on account of the fact that different languages don't necessarily have simple correlations between words, statements, phrases, grammatical quirks, intonations, etc. And since clever writing in any language is going to take advantage of these quirks, translating these aspects into a language with completely different rules leaves you with a ton of different options, none of which exactly recreate the original. In the early days of online anime fandom, there was a lot of debate over the merits of localization versus transliteration. Localizing dialogue has the advantage of making it more engaging for English listeners and readers, but has the disadvantage of straying farther from the original intentions of the creators, and this can have more of a rippling effect on your perception of the story than you might expect. Because of the fact that the Japanese language is highly template driven and couched in their much greater patience for repetition, anime dialogue is overloaded with stock phrases and intonations, the use of which are often integral in building the exact type of character which the show is trying to present. For instance, in No Game No Life, Izuna speaks in a very rude and confrontational way, but ends all of her sentences with desu, which is considered a more grammatically correct and polite way of ending sentences. This was localized in the Crunchyroll subtitles as her saying please at the end of each sentence, which just kind of feels like a non sequitur a lot of the time. You can see the train of logic that would lead them to choose this word, since saying please is polite, but it's not something that would almost ever be grammatically correct at the end of a random English sentence, and as a result, the logic behind the character's manner of speaking is obscured to look like just some weird meme, which isn't necessarily unfair, but at least the meme made sense in Japanese. So what if we translated this more literally? There isn't really a word that connotes the same thing which desu does in English, so this isn't exactly possible. If she ended every sentence with the word period, it would be closer to meaning the same thing in a literal sense, but not in a cultural one. A lot of translators will handle this by ditching the sentence structure aspect and trying to translate something akin to the same grammatical idea. For instance, in Oreimo, Saori ends all of her sentences with the polite but very outdated closer de gozaru, which the subbers interpret by just having her speak in old-timey English. This preserves the intentions a little better, but it also over-exaggerates how much she's really laying into this character, and loses out entirely on the repetitious aspect of her literally saying the same thing again and again. Japanese sentence structure is so unique that it may not be possible to translate these quirks in a way that makes sense in English, and if you're someone who cares mostly about just being entertained in the moment and not so much about the greater metacultural element of anime, then you might be fine with that. After all, if you're someone who does care about that aspect of the culture, then you'll probably figure out all this shit eventually anyways, either from hanging out in hardcore communities who make reference to these character attributes, or having it explained by someone like me while watching with them, or deciding to pick up Japanese, or even just simply watching so many damn cartoons that you notice the patterns yourself. Personally, if I was writing the subtitles, I would just put in a slide before the episode explaining the speech patterns, and then literally put the word desu or degozaru at the end of each line, but I understand why some viewers would hate this. Having said that, I still think that there is a ton which subbers could do to better preserve the intentions of the original Japanese dialogue, simply by doing more to recognize and replicate the emotions of the line in a way that would convey the same feeling in English. For instance, I was watching episode 9 of Oreimo in prep for an upcoming video, and I got to this part where Kuroneko tells her little sister that she's talking to the denizens of the world of darkness, and then the sister asks if the people in this picture on her desk are in fact denizens of said world. Kuroneko hesitates for a moment, because in front of those people she would ordinarily express her sentiments inauthentically, behind several layers of meme speak, but she doesn't feel the need to be so guarded in front of her baby sister in the privacy of their home, and would prefer to phrase things with a clarity which this little girl can understand. As such, she responds, as the Crunchy subs translate it,
違うわ。その人は、私たちと同じ世界に住む友 友達よ
Except that what this translation misses out on is that she specifically phrases the sentence in such a way as to put the word tomodachi, meaning friends, at the very end. Almost as if all of the other words in the sentence existed just to push off the word that she's afraid of saying for as long as possible. She even has to pause again before saying the word because it's the first time which she's probably ever had to admit the way she feels about these two out loud. Taking a step back, the full phrase which Kuroneko speaks is Chigau wa sono hito wa sono watashi tachi no onaji sekai ni sugu tomodachi yo, the literal translation of which would be
違うわその人はその私たちと同じ世界に住む友達よ
Personally, if I was going to approach translating this line, regardless of what verbiage I chose in describing the fact that these were friends from the same world, the most important thing to preserving the intent of the scene is the rhythm of the sentence. It could have been something like
違うわその人はその私たちと同じ世界に住む友達よ
Hell, translating Chigawa as incorrect specifically might even feel more in character for Kuroneko. Both the Crunchyroll translation and my version mean the same thing and use mostly the same words, but my version better reflects the cadence and intentionality of the original scene. Granted, doing something like this requires not just an understanding of both languages, but also the ability to recognize the artistry in the original and to replicate that artistry in the other language. And while I don't know the exact process by which the Crunchy sub team receives and translates their episodes, I can't imagine that they have a whole ton of time to pore over every single line and make sure that it's the best possible translation. Just one more way that the factory line process by which animation is created and brought to consumers damages the intentionality of the art. But hey, that's the industry! Do you wish I spent more time thinking about how to make my videos perfect before they come to you? Probably not. Support me on Patreon anyway so I can have the extra hours to sate my own mad desire for quality control, and stick around for another video tomorrow.